Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. I'm Guy Platten, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this latest edition of the ICS Leadership Insight Live series. And during this series, we aim to spark different conversations by bringing together leaders from inside and outside the shipping sector to look at the key strategic global issues that impact our industry. Our discussion today is focused firmly on our people and will explore the critical topic of stimulating and facilitating greater diversity in maritime. At ICS, we believe it is vital to provide a safe company culture in which equality, fairness and respect are incorporated into all our policies and behaviours. In March of this year, we launched our inaugural Maritime Diversity and Inclusion Charter in order to encourage shipping companies to improve and annually review their diversity and inclusion practices to create opportunities for all, irrespective of the gender, race, ethnic origin, nationality, disability, age, sexual orientation, gender identity or religion. Our Maritime Diversity and Inclusion Charter is available on our website for downloading. We'll also be launching very soon our new Diversity and Inclusion Toolkit that has been developed to create awareness of diversity and inclusion and inspire change in strategies, policies and practices to enable the maritime industry to meet the needs of the diverse global community. Just to let you all know, the discussion will be recorded and is available to attendees after the meeting. And we also would encourage you to participate by asking questions using the question function on your control panel. But first, let me turn to today's expert and amazing panel. First, I'm delighted to welcome Maria Antonio, Group HR Director for Morgan Advanced Materials UK. Welcome to you, Maria.
Hi, Guy. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And our second panelist is Karen Ursel, CEO, MF Shipping Group, based in the Netherlands, also an ICS board member for the Netherlands, chair of our diversity panel, and board member of the Royal Association Netherlands Shipowners, as well as being vice president of the European Community Shipowners Association. So welcome to you, Karen.
Thanks, Guy.
And completing our panel today is Catherine Upson, Vice President, Partnerships and Strategic Implementation for BP Shipping. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Well, let's get straight into it as well now. There's so much to cover. We've got a few things we want to discuss, but again, I would urge you to put some questions into the chat box and we'll try and come to them as much as we possibly can. I suppose a difficult one maybe to start with for you, Karen. What is going well in shipping in relation to diversity, and what do you think needs to be improved and how?
Thank you, Guy. And indeed, you pose a big and difficult question to me first. I would like to go back a little bit, and I know we're going to discuss this a little bit further on as well. But I think in our industry, and I'm very happy that we actually discussed the topic today, because we've been working on this for, I think, almost 2 years, Guy, and always the main topic like decarbonization and other items are being put forward on our agendas, I think, which is a logical one. At the same time, it's all about our people. And if you look at diversity within our industry, it always was more or less looked upon as, okay, diversity is we have people from Asia, we have people from Europe, and that's it. I think that the people in the audience today are the organizations who really would like to learn and share best practices. That's what we really look forward to. So what is going well, I would say, from a rather traditional approach, we are making good progress and great steps by looking at diversity from a broader perspective, and not, that's a failure some people still make, not men versus women. No, let's look at it from all the different ages, looking at the new, especially with all the newcomers entering, how can you look at possibilities for disabled people maybe in a part of our industry. So looking at the whole picture, and I think that is where also in, let's say, ethnic underrepresentation, let's take a look at that, and that's why we started this initiative 2 years ago.
So just a quick follow up to that one. I mean, we all know that shipping is a very traditional industry, particularly in terms of culture and in practices. How, I mean, you've been a real trailblazer with this. How have you gone about trying to change that culture within your own company, for example?
Now, yeah, I think it's all about being very clear that you want to be an inclusive organization, give the people the opportunity to speak up, and speak up not only within, let's say, within the hierarchy which we have on board, and also I think in a lot of our companies. You can't do this alone. So also our clients have been instrumental in making these changes. And we also include them in all the processes we do, because we think a company culture takes a long time to create, Guy. And I think, the fact that we launched a vessel which has the name Toon Equality is also a very clear sign of our customers having the same core values, because building a vessel is for a lifetime. That it's not for 1 or 2 years. So it's a lifetime commitment, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's very good. But turning to you, Catherine, what does diversity, equity, inclusion actually mean for BP, and what part do you play in trying to introduce those values into the company?
Thank you. So a lot of what Karen just talked about really resonates for me and for the work that we're doing at BP as well. And I think the starting point for us has been that there are just too many people all over the world who don't have equal access to opportunity or experiences. And I think we feel that we have a responsibility to do things differently and to create more equity. And hopefully I can talk about some of the things we're in action on a bit later on. So we really want to create a business where everyone feels safe and they can bring their best selves to work every day. And this is the same. This is the same for BP as it is in BP Shipping. So that's absolutely our ambition. And I think if I summarise for BP Shipping, when I think of DE&I, it's about creating an environment where everyone can be themselves and reach their full potential, where we value difference and we hear everybody's voice and we nurture the talent that we have. And also we have zero tolerance to prejudice. And I think those are the guiding aims for us as a business. And I think, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, add one other thing. When I think about DE&I in BP in particular, the thing that really resonates for me over the years I've been in the organisation is around the business resource groups that we have. So this is a big area of focus for us across the company, and we were working out how many we've got. We think we've got 150 business resource groups, and they're groups that support DE&I within BP. We try to work out a list of what we cover. So we're covering age, armed forces, disability and mental well-being, ethnicity and minorities, gender equality, nationality, new joiners, part-time workers, sexual orientation and gender identity, social mobility and working parents, and neurodiversity. So really across a global organisation, we're really in action in so many areas. And in fact, there's 70 groups alone that support gender equality. So I think it's really, in summary, it's woven into everything that we do in BP. It's good for us, it's good for society, we think it's good for our business.
And just sort of similar to one to question to Karen, how hard has it been to actually change the culture? And what, let's face it, it's been a very traditional industry as well, your sector, BP, not just shipping, but also the energy sector as a whole. That must have been, it's great what you sound like you're doing, but the actual culture, changed people's mindset. How hard has that been?
Question to me, Guy? Or
Okay, Catherine, sorry.
Yeah.
So how hard has it been to change the culture?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it does take time. That is for sure. It's not something that can be done overnight. But I think equally, what BP has done, certainly as I see in the last few years, has taken some really proactive steps to make a difference in thinking about how we recruit, how we promote, how we retain staff, and really trying to share the journey that we're on, to publish data, to have clear operating guidelines for us all as to how we include DE&I into our business, and really making the case for it across all of the organisation. And I think sometimes it's you have to be able to see it, really, to be it. And for the first time, BP actually has more women on its executive leadership team than men, which is the first time ever in the company's history. So again, it takes time, but you can be proactive, you can make some bold decisions, and BP certainly is doing that. I see it myself.
Thanks, Catherine. Actually, it's a good segue into a question back for you, Maria. You've had the opportunity to operate at C-suite in a number of major organisations. How do you ensure that diversity, equity and inclusion is included in board level meetings, and how serious is it taken at board level?
Yeah, yes, Guy. As you say, I've worked in a number of what I'd call traditionally male-dominated industries in my career. So, you know, just as a small snapshot, I spent 21 years in automotive. I then spent a couple of years working for the UK government for Transport for London, which was essentially rail. Like Catherine, I then spent 12 years working in Germany for E.ON, which is an energy organisation. We covered everything from call centres through to what I would describe as the holes and poles guys. So, you know, the networks people that, you know, really do the hard yards out in all weather. And I currently work for a manufacturing organisation. I would say the themes have been common throughout my 30-year career around the importance of diversity and inclusion. And I think I came from my first company, you know, I didn't know it when I was a young graduate, but I worked for an American company that clearly instilled DE&I before it was even a thing in Europe, I'd like to say. So I've grown up with it as a common thread throughout my career. So how do I get people's attention on it? I think it's increasingly easy to do so, but I always tackle it through a number of dimensions. It's first of all, it's morally the right thing to do, and I think people get that it's the right thing to do. But I think where you've seen a shift is, I always start with, you know, there's a legal imperative, you've also got the business imperative, and then you get to the moral imperative. And I think you have to weave all those three dimensions into the discussion when you talk to the board, because I think it will be, you know, and some of the initiatives you undertake actually do require some investment. And I think all of us work in commercial organisations where, you know, money's not, you know, free. I'd love to think work in an organisation where money was never any object and you could just do wonderful I wonders. But I think one of the most powerful things around, you know, when you talk about a DE&I initiative is they pay for themselves 10 times over. And I think one of the things to really demonstrate to business leaders is the value that the initiatives bring to the organisation. I think the other thing, in fact, just prior to this call, I've been talking to one of our banking organisations, because the other thing that's increasingly important for companies about where they get funding from the financial institutions. You know, if you want to have green investors, you know, DE&I is a fundamental plank to that. So I would say I've seen a shift over my career onto, I would say, you know, in the early days of my career, you were certainly pushing it. Now the board really pull you on the topic as well. So I think it's a much more equitable relationship, because they understand it matters to investors now as well. So besides it being the right thing, you know, it really is, I would say it's second only to emissions, carbon reduction, CO2 reduction. That tends to be the next thing that investors now talk to you around, the DE&I agenda and what you're actually doing on it.
Thanks, Maria. I saw you, Karen, you wanted to come in on that one as well. You were nodding furiously there.
What I think and what I really appreciate, we're talking here with, this panel is mainly about huge companies. You've worked for huge companies. I think what the intention also of, and we will come to the toolkit is there's a very big group within our industry, which companies are smaller, and those companies will be faced with the same challenges, and ESG and the focus should be a lot on the social. So yes, the fact that bankers and other institutions are making a huge point of it actually helps us a lot. Exactly what you say.
Yeah.
And that's good, but it's also, yeah, how do you call it? The small business owners, they are the ones, or medium business owners, they are the ones struggling the most, I would say.
But I think my point I would add to that, Karen, is it really doesn't matter. One thing we're all in common, and I'm sure I'm not an expert in the shipping industry by any means, but I can't believe your industry is different from any other industry that I mean, we work globally in my current organisation.
Mm-hmm.
We're all short of people and short of talent. And unless you have an inclusive organisation where you value diversity, for me, it's fundamental now. That's what candidates look at, your diversity and inclusion policy, how you treat people. And if you really want to get on top of the labour shortage, this is no longer a nice to have. It's a hygiene factor.
It's a must to have. Fully agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very powerful points. Actually, I mean, we set up the diversity panel, what, 2 or 3 years ago now, didn't we, Karen? Yeah. And can you just give us a little bit of a background on why you were such a passionate to set this up, and some examples of what's happened to date and what's planned for the future with it, because it really has been a bit of a trailblazer for our industry.
No, yeah, exactly, Guy. I think, again, a lot of respect for ICS for taking this up a little bit over 2 years ago, because at that time we already recognized, hey, we need to step up. There's a huge challenge ahead of us, and we need to create a tool and toolkits to actually make it more visible what we as an industry are already doing. And so that's when Guy set up the 2 panels, actually, a women's panel and a diversity panel. I'm the chair of the diversity panel, and where we started with was actually doing a survey and take that as a baseline for what is the situation as per today. Actually, the situation per, I think, 2020 it was. And we will repeat that survey every 3 years in order to also follow follow the curve, so to say. Next to that, and that is a big one, we will be launching a diversity toolkit. I think it's in November, Guy, if I'm correct. And that toolkit is meant to give guideline, but also possibilities for what kind of strategy companies could follow, and it's the whole spectrum, so to say. Again, the diversity group, and that is the good part, is being created by also a diverse group, where we asked the people who join us, share your best practices, because we can learn so much from each other. And if we can share those best practices, it's actually a great guideline to implement things within your own organization, but mainly also look at it from the bigger picture. Because from looking at it from the bigger picture, we recognize our reputation is not always good. At the same time, we do so much, at least I'm proud of that. If I look at mental health or bullying and harassment, ICS was the first one to actually come out with a guideline on bullying and harassment many years ago. And that was under highlighted, I think, at that time. And this is really the time, just like Maria said, we are a great industry. I really believe that. We need young talent, but we also need to be there for the current employees. And I think only those companies, just like Maria said, who are inclusive and who are willing to make clear statements that you're there for your people, will be the ones who can attract and keep their seafarers, but also for the office staff, of course, because that's just as important. What is our purpose? Why are we here? And why do we want, I always add a B, why do we want to belong to the company, but also to this industry?
That's a really good point. We're getting lots of questions in, by the way, just to warn you all. so sort of obviously sparking something with the audience, so that's really good. Catherine, just taking that forward a little bit, what do you see the challenges, particularly around BP, but maybe the wider sector, to be tackled in the next decade? Where do you think the next big challenges in this field lie, and how do we go about tackling them?
Well, there are some really interesting challenges facing the shipping sector, and in some ways that's really what makes it exciting and an interesting time to be in the business. And I guess I'll maybe focus on 2 areas that are at the forefront of our minds. and one is around gender diversity, and the other, as touched on already, is around the skills that we're going to need for the future for the energy transition. And in some ways, I think there is a good story, and it's been alluded to already. In some areas of energy shipping, we're doing well when it comes to diversity, particularly social background, race, and religion. But when it comes to diversity, particularly gender, we're still not doing well. And the statistics that we've looked at is that I think there are approximately 24,000 women in a total seafaring population of 1.9 million. And so it's just clearly a male-dominated industry, and has been for a long time. But the industry doesn't benefit from that with such a low gender balance. And I think as we move into the energy transition, we need to widen the pool of people that are coming into the industry. So it's not a new problem at all, but I think it needs new approaches. One of the things that we've done at BP is we've rolled out a program which is called Men as Allies. And this is across BP, but also within BP Shipping. And this is really engaging with the men in our organisation to get them advocating for gender diversity, and actively supporting and promoting women, whether it's in the office or whether it's at sea. And this is a programme that's had a lot of success, debated a lot of conversation, a lot of debate within the organisation, and it's definitely helping us move forward. And I would encourage other companies to think about how they can really promote diversity and support different voices and different perspectives. And very quickly, the other area that we think needs to be tackled is around skills for the future. And obviously, the energy transition has been mentioned already. It's a big focus for us at BP. The transition to net zero, and obviously a lot of talk about the different hydrogen vectors and how those are going to be shipped going forward. So we will need new skills and new experiences to come into the sector. And this is the challenge. It's, as was talked about before, it's a problem of competition across different industries now for people. So the question that we need to tackle is how do we compete for skills and resources? How do we upskill the existing workforce that we've got? And really make career in maritime more attractive. It is an interesting place to work. There's a lot changing, a lot happening, and they're tough challenges. And I think we need to come together as an industry as well to collaborate. I think that really has to be the way forward. Yes, we can do things individually, but it's going to take us working together as a sector to really make the change that we need.
I mean, really interesting, especially that Men as Allies. I really like that. It's quite nice. It's sort of, I can see it does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? Yeah. How do you actually go about attracting women into BP Shipping or BP Group as a whole? You've got to actually get them across the line, even if there are lots of these good practices when they're here. How do we sort of appeal to that demographic?
So I think there is a lot of interest in the energy transition. So I think as an organisation, with the work that we're doing, we're appealing to a wide range of people, and obviously as BP Shipping we tap into that recruitment process. But I think particularly when it comes to maritime, it really does start very early on. I mean, I think particularly, I'm based in London, and these are initiatives we have in the UK, but we go in to schools, we promote particularly the STEM subjects, talk to people about a career in maritime, and really plant that seed at a very early age, because I'm not sure that everybody even knows that this is a career option for them, particularly for women. I don't know that they would necessarily consider it at an early stage. So that's one example, I think, of what you can do, is really is start spreading the word about what opportunities are available, and doing that at an early stage, and getting people when they're young and they're completely open-minded about what they can go and do.
That's really, I mean, my daughter's a seafarer, but she only became a seafarer because I was, and she asked me about it, and that's the problem, isn't it? It's trying to get beyond that, and you speak to any cadets, really, you often find they've got a relative who has been at sea or been in this profession. So how do we move it forward? But Maria, you've done a huge amount in your career to drive change, particularly in the area of the gender diversity. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what do you see are the most effective tools to encourage change that perhaps maritime could learn from?
Yeah, well, first thing I would say, which may not be what you'd like to hear, is there is no silver bullet. I wish I could tell you there was one thing that you could do that could transform. What I would say is it's a whole series of actions that, it starts with you know, and I think the other thing is you have to focus on your full pipeline. So you see a lot of companies at the moment making progress around diversity and inclusion in their senior leaders because they're recruiting internally, they recruit externally, and it improves their numbers. But for me, it's about looking at the whole pipeline right from the bottom into the early careers. But I think before I even say any of that, turn to some specifics. The one thing I would say, and the message I drive home to any leadership team I work for, is unless you measure it, you can't improve it. So I treat it like any other business KPI. So you need to start with data, and you then need to set yourself an ambition. And I'm not saying a target, I'm saying an ambition of where you want to get to. And I'd also say to people, one of my biggest hints or tips or hints is be realistic in your ambition, because I've seen so many companies set, you know, wildly ambitious targets that they really haven't got a hope of reaching because they don't understand their current data, they don't understand the market that they're operating in. So I'd set a challenging objective. I'd also, like any other KPI in your business, set a glide path. You know, like, so if anyone came to you with a financial glide path that was snow plowed, you know, with it all pushed to the end of the period, you'd be challenging that. So I think you need to understand your baseline. You need to understand and set yourself a stretchy but realistic target to work from, and you measure yourself year on year against that. And you can do lots of simple things. For me, it's around making sure you have diverse candidate lists. So how do you get a diverse candidate list? You need to think about where you advertise. Are you advertising in, you know, advertising non-traditional places? Have open days. I mean, when I worked in the energy sector, a good example is we had apprentices coming into the energy sector. It was predominantly male dominated, and when I looked at the data, we wanted to increase our diversity there. And when we looked at the statistics, it revealed two different types of issues. For gender, yeah, we were just not attracting girls, young women into the industry. So we thought about, we had a day in the life of apprentice, a day in the life of a networks engineer. So we had open days, we had mini workshops for them. We looked at our recruitment process for as well. But when we looked at race, for example, when we looked at the data, we did not have an issue on attracting minorities into our apprenticeship schemes, but they were falling out disproportionately in the process. So we did a deep dive on what our recruitment process involved, and were people disproportionately falling out a particular stage of it. So we looked at the tests. Were they the right tests? Were they filtering out people unconsciously? We did a lot of upskilling of our line managers to improve unconscious bias in the recruitment process. So I think it's not a one solution always. You need to, again, it comes back to understanding the data and looking at your recruitment pipeline. I think the other thing that's important is, once you've recruited women or minorities, the environment needs to be correct. Because I think if I can give you examples of the underground, the trains in the UK, they had this huge recruitment campaign to recruit women, which they did successfully, and then they lost them all. Why? Because they hadn't a thought about the day of a life of a woman actually riding a train in the UK underground system. There was no facilities, there were no uniforms. So you need to think about the whole infrastructure. Have you got locker rooms? Are the toilets right? Are the uniforms, you know, correct? Because for every woman you recruit and you lose through a bad experience, they tell 10 people. So it's also about the environment you create in the industry. I also agree with Catherine's point about you need to think about inclusion, because there's nothing worse. I think, you know, one of the downsides sometimes of driving DE&I is you lose people along the way. Everybody has to feel they gain something out of it. And the way I certainly push employee resource groups in the organisation is whatever work they do for women or the disabled or LGBT community is good for everybody in the business. And I think that's an important message to drive home. So I could talk for this for hours, Guy, but that would be my...
That's your three of you are a moderator's dream, I can tell you now. So, but actually, honestly, there's so many questions coming in there. And one of them, perhaps a little bit controversial, just on the last one, and feel free, any of you, to come in. How do we keep the male employers with us on this journey? Because I think there's a feeling that with all these initiatives, all these things, somehow you're going to disenfranchise a proportion of your workforce who feel they're not being looked after as well.
And I think that was the point I was just the last point I was trying to make. You need to drive diversity and inclusion. And I think you need to drive home the point that anything that the employee resource groups are dealing with or suggesting is good for everybody. And there's lots of things you can do. I would always make employee resource groups open to everyone. So we have an employee resource group called Women at Morgan. It's open to everybody. In about an hour's time, we've got a global webinar on the menopause, and the point I'm going to make is the men piece in the menopause is really important. So I think it's really about driving home what's good for a minority group is good for everybody. That's how I tackle it.
Guy, if I may ask a question to Maria, one of the things which not struggling with, but a question, because unfortunately, often within organizations, everybody looks at HR department, which often is a woman, being the one trying to work on all of this. My experience is that if we actually have, like for instance, Guy, you're a really trailblazer yourself as well for all of this. I think it really helps if let's say my management team, who considers out of four gentlemen and 2 women, that it would be very helpful if we have an additional gentleman pulling this whole program. Is that something you recognize, or should it matter?
No, it doesn't. Actually, interestingly, my Women at Morgan executive sponsor is actually a man. So he volunteered, but I think if you really also want to drive change, I think you need leadership commitment to it. It cannot be something that HR drives. It has to be commitment from the whole leadership team. And I guess I would explain the analogy of diversity and inclusion a bit like people. I've worked in HR for 30 years, and I keep saying to leaders, your people issues are not something you think about at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. You know, people are your day job. It is not you're running your ship, your ship, or this piece of machinery, or running R&D, and then Friday afternoon I've got to think about my people list and send it to HR. People are your day job, and in the same way, to really make progress on DE&I, it's got to be embedded in the DNA of the organisation. It's got to be something that gets considered when you're making investments. So you consider, just like in every other part of your business, it's a lens through which you need to think about things.
Thanks, Maria. I'll take another couple of questions from this chat box here before we go on to the rest of them, if I may, because some of them quite fascinating, really, and I'd really like your viewpoint. But one question's come in, which is improving on DEI often focuses on individual companies or clusters of companies. From my point of view, as DEI tries to ensure equity across the industry and ensure human safety, physical, psychological, and psychosocial, and access to fundamental rights, how do we get those not acknowledging that dire need to act in accordance with these beliefs? How do we collectively make the industry more DEI? As we know, even a few bad experiences, and Maria's touched them as well, can cause great harm. And prioritising DEI, and I am afraid that those prioritising DEI are fewer than we might think, and we need to create proper change. So I open that out. Would anybody like to come in on that one? Or do I have to? Yeah, go on, Karen, you come in.
I think you're making the point made is a crucial one. Yesterday I was on a different panel together with Natalie Shaw, the Director of Employment within the ICS, and it's all about human rights in the end, and employment rights. And if I then focus on the seafarers, MLC is of course leading, and we do a lot within MLC. but this is not something, and parts of it I think are in MLC. But I think the fact that we as ICS, International Chamber of Shipping, start with this project and make it a point, and also within, I think, within in the European Ship Owners Association, there's also a project, what is called WES, but it's also focusing on women in shipping and digitalization, because I think it's proven that there is a lot of young females following actually that kind of STEM courses. And the toolkit is mentioned, is meant as an actually toolkit to get those organizations who are not there, to give them guidelines. Hey, this is an option, and I think very strongly what Maria said, those who are not doing it will actually lose in the middle long term, and most probably will be unable to attract both people in their offices, but also people at sea, and that means they lose business. So for me, it's a no-brainer to actually not do anything.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Maria, did you want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, you know, I've worked in male-dominated industries all my life, and I've always been surrounded by people saying, we can't do this, it's impossible. I would say nothing is impossible, and I would say that, you know, unless organisations, unless shipping thinks about different ways of doing things, you're just not going to be able to attract people in the longer term, or you're going to attract people who feel they have no choice. You're not going to attract the right people for the right reasons. So I think, you know, change is possible. It starts with lots of small changes. Lots of small changes build a movement, and I would say in every organisation there is someone who wants to make things better for people. I've never been in an organisation where you cannot find a champion to start something.
May I add something before going to Catherine, because I'm looking at you, Catherine, and knowing we step in maybe too much. But I really mean it, because if I look at your sector, we also have tankers in management, and the fact that you are stepping up as tanker industry or as energy industry, also saying, hey, ESG, the S of social, is important to us. That means that it actually is a helpful tool for us as an industry to say, hey, those who are not acting will be phased out. Same like you said, Maria, with bankers are looking at this. So it is very helpful if you have organizations or tools from the outside. Same with Poseidon Principles, Guy. I think all those initiatives are helping us better our whole environment and our whole culture and industry. And sorry, that was the bridge to Catherine. Sorry.
No, it's super interesting. I was just going to add from our side that the feedback we get from our experienced male seafarers who were working in the 90s were that in that period there were actually more women on board ships, and that in fact the culture and environment was a very positive one. Possibly, you know, they describe it as being a better environment, and so I think there's also something to be learnt from history there, that there is a lot of value to be got from having a more diverse environment. It isn't something that should be viewed as threatening or negative at all. There's, you know, this is men in our organisation who are saying this. And the other thing we've been involved in is the All Aboard Alliance, which is part of the Global Maritime Forum, which is also bringing together, it will be different companies in different regions, but into this conversation. And I think the more people who are able to get involved in the conversation, in the discussion, is how it starts to snowball. And it's exactly as you say, Maria, it is the small steps. And as we share these steps and best practice, I think we can start to share this across the industry, and people can see the value that it brings.
Actually, just on that one, there's quite a few questions coming on a theme of actually how do we measure DEI in the organisation, and it's interested what metrics you use in that, and how do you measure success, and has that helped improve the DEI in BP for example?
So I mean, DE&I for us is a journey that we've been on. We're still on it. So we do measure. We do have metrics. We have the data, as Maria says. It's absolutely the starting point. So last year, the proportion of women in our global workforce was almost at 40%. So we're measuring that every year. But we don't just look at the quantitative data, but we're also looking at sentiment as well, to understand what we're doing in the DE&I space. So we have regular surveys and understanding people's views on what we're doing as an organisation. The most recent metric we have from BP Shipping is that approximately 70% of our team believe that the approach to diversity, equity and inclusion will make BP more successful over time. So those are the type of things that we're looking at. We do publish our data. It is online. People are welcome to go and have a look. And that's really the way we're approaching it, is looking at the data and taking feedback and guidance from across all of our teams, not just in shipping, but across the organisation.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm going to go back to the audience now, because honestly, it's so engaging. But here's a question which I'll throw it open. And I'm saying this as I'm going to be a grandfather, hopefully in April. So my daughter's a seafarer, is expecting. But the question is, what advice would you give to someone who is considering a career at sea, but is also thinking about starting a family? Is it worth pursuing?
I would say absolutely. And I understand the question, because and it's also depending on which part of the world you're living. I think that makes a huge, or the vessels you are trading. I would say, if you're on board of a cruise vessel or a ferry which is doing short trips, it actually should not be an issue at all. I think on the commercial vessels, people are thinking somewhat more traditional, that hey, is it then they come up with all these, is it physically possible, etc. I think those days are way over. I think if you have a good employer with good conditions, there's absolutely the possibility to remain a seafarer, not a discussion whatsoever. Becoming parents is hopefully a two-way street, so you also have a strong partner, hopefully, who will take up just as much as responsibilities as before. So I see no issue whatsoever. And
yeah, I was going to add, can I add an out of shipping view? I mean,
yeah,
let me give you an out of shipping view. We have many women in the armed forces that go into active service for long periods of time, that are mothers and manage it. And you say partly through partners, partly through the infrastructure that's in place. So, knowing nothing about shipping, but knowing other sectors, that manage it. And the military is one great example. Yeah. If it can be done in other sectors, I think shipping may need to look at some of those to draw in about how they manage it.
And I can add to that, for us, having people who've had the experience at sea, who are able to come and work in the office as well, it adds huge benefit to our business to have that experience on tap in the office. So I think for me, it's looking at Maritime as not just being one role. There are a lot of opportunities in there. There may be a period of time where being in an office environment could be the right one for you. The experience that you bring is huge and massively valued. Doesn't mean that you don't then go back to sea. So I think it's looking at it as a whole career, with what are the options within the sector, is another way to approach it as well.
Yeah. The airlines is another a good example, because there comes a time where women can't fly just for natural body. So I'd say airlines, military. I think there's plenty of other sectors for shipping to look at to get some best practice in.
Yeah, I think certainly something we need to address as well, and good forward-thinking companies do address it, of course. But it's a good question, whoever asked it out there, because I think that is a concern people do when they look at a career here. But Maria, just turn to you. Do you think there'll ever be a point where we stop focusing on DEI because it's all been done? Are you optimistic for that, and what needs to happen before you actually reach that point?
And I don't think, unfortunately, not in my lifetime. And if I can look at things like gender pay disparity, the statistics are really quite shocking. That, you know, if you look at the, you know, there's a good survey about women counts and the difference between, you know, women in political positions. It looks at women in judicial positions. You know, if you look at things like the FTSE 100, I think there's more men named John than women in the FTSE 100. So I think we've got a long to go. I think there's some trailblazing companies, BP, Unilever, Nestle, but you know, I have to say it is hard work every day. But I think I think there's been a huge societal change on the topic, from it not being seen as a nice to have, but it's now seen as a business imperative. I will mention it, and again, I don't know enough about the shipping sector and how it works. When we're talking about how you drive change, another group of people that have always been powerful allies to me has been trade unions, because despite what an individual union representative may think, I have not come across a union organisation anywhere in the world that is not driving the topic of diversity and inclusion. So you sometimes find allies in the most unexpected places.
Thank you.
I would say, Guy, that your statement is perfectly right, and I think both internationally and also in Europe, there's a very strong bond with the unions on several topics. I dare to say.
Thank you. So just another question, which obviously ties in with something you mentioned, Catherine, earlier. Honestly, this is great for me. But you talked about your men as allies, the initiative in BP, and the question for you is, how do we all build more allies, and what tips to the panel, not just you, Catherine, maybe Karen and Maria can also answer, in for encouraging more allies in this area?
So for the men as allies, this has been really creating the right environment to talk about diversity, because you have people coming with such a wide range of views and possibly concerns as well. And it's really creating an environment where people can sit down and say, this is what I don't understand, or this is what I'm worried about. And we've got people who have been well trained and very well researched in a multitude of topics, who are able to really facilitate these conversations and encourage people to engage more, to see how they can support the people around them, how the wider culture can benefit from having more people engaged in promoting diversity. And it really is an ongoing conversation. We run some workshops as well, really taking people through some of the experiences that other people in the wider team have had. How would they feel if they were in that situation? Is there a way that they could support those people going through those situations? How do we stop these things from happening again? How do we create a better environment for everybody? So it's very much an ongoing process, done small teams, but really bringing men and women together to have these conversations. We're very clear that it's not a conversation for women to have on their own, or for men to have on their own. We need to have these conversations together, and it's really encouraging the debate and accepting that people have different views, and that those can be discussed and debated, and hopefully that moves us forward, creating more of us that are pulling in the same direction.
Thanks, Catherine. And Karen, how do we get more allies?
I was just making notes, because I'm also learning here. No, because I think what you said, Catherine, is rightfully at the same time. We try to do that, and prior to the pandemic, we were actually visiting all our different crewing, not all, but the major crewing supplying countries and our agencies, and have the one-on-one discussions with our seafarers. Of course, during the pandemic, you do a lot of things online, but I would say a face-to-face discussion, especially about topics like this, is way better. How do we find allies? I think You mentioned Global Maritime Forum. I know ICS Guy is also and Natalie are on the background also involved. I actually attended the last one, and I attended on purpose the D&I and the how to attract talent discussions, because this is so important. And I think, again, a cooperation or is the only way to actually make change. Yeah, we can do it within our companies, but we need tools, and we also need some guidance. And I think the multinationals have enough resources to do it, but I'm also focusing on purpose on the middle-sized or smaller organizations, because they need some tools from us. And I think, going back to the diversity toolkit, it's a one of a kind and a first one. And yeah, we really hope that that also gives the audience who's listening today some tools to actually create their own strategies and create an own inclusive culture.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going
I see my face on screen. I'm thinking, so I look a little bit.
we see you fine. Yeah, I think it froze a little bit there, but thank you for that. Just what do you see, perhaps Catherine or Karen, and then I'll bring you in, Maria. What would you like to see implemented in the short, medium, long term to improve DEI in the maritime sector? You mentioned the toolkit, Karen, but what other things would you like to see?
Can I pass it on first to be the easy one to Catherine, so I can think a little bit?
Yeah, sure, Catherine.
So I think in the short term, I think there is work to be done within all of our organisations, and I think that probably is the starting point. And as I talked about it earlier on, in the business resource groups that we run within BP, I think are a great starting point for the organisation to bring people into these conversations. We've recently set one up specifically within shipping now, which is focused on improving diversity within our shipping team, whether that's in the office or for the fleet that we've got. And this is developing mentoring programs and recruitment campaigns. And again, there's certainly a focus here on gender when it comes to recruitment campaigns, because we definitely need more women within our organisation. But really sharing the career stories that people have had, setting up networking events, connecting people across different levels within the organisation. And we feel that people are better informed then about what's going on in the industry, particularly with regards to the energy transition and what that's going to mean. So I think in the short term, I think there's things within organisations that can be done. But then I think longer term, I think it does come down to what we do as a wider industry. And it is a big question about how we engage more widely. I do think the work that the ICS is doing, that organisations like the All Aboard Alliance are doing, are really the starting point for here. And I think, particularly as big companies, as you say, we possibly have more resources to be able to put into this, but also for us to share the work that we're doing. You know, one of the reasons why, you know, I'm really keen to talk about the men as allies and some of the work we're doing ourselves, because if we can share what we've done, then and it helps other people, then yeah, that's just good for everybody.
And
thanks, Catherine. Karen.
Adding to that, I think a very good comment from, I think it was Maria, and apologize if it was from you, but many years ago, we also started with informally in discussing internally, hey, we want to have more women on board. We want to have more women on board. We want to have women in male traditional roles here in the office. So technical inspectors, quality inspectors, IT departments, everything which is more or less expected to be filled in by the other gender. Let's create a change there as well. And then you say, hey, what is the progress? And again, we come back to what is data, analyze your data, set a target. And as Maria said, set a realistic target. Unfortunately, my hope and maybe naivety was that we don't need it, as long as we discuss it constantly here within the organization. But KPIs do help. So I think the fact everybody listening here is very engaged and interested in this topic. I would really hope if one-on-one you could become one of the partners in the diversity group, Catherine, kind of putting you on the spot, because we can learn from each other, and sharing those best practices actually what our aim was in order to create solutions for our whole industry. Because if everybody keeps the cards to the chest, nothing will change. So I hope I don't put you too much on the spot, but I'm kind of sense you nodded, so that's an okay.
And I guess I would encourage the industry. I mean, you're not front runners on this topic. There are many other male-dominated sectors that never thought they could change. That they've made dramatic changes over the. I mean, I have to say, in my lifetime, when I started in manufacturing, women were not even allowed to do night shift work. You know, so you know, even in my career, I've seen such dramatic changes. And my other hint is it won't always go right. So if you do an initiative that doesn't go well, review it. If it a fast fail, I mean, but it is a series of small steps. But I think I come back to the point about you need a baseline to know where you're going. Otherwise, in my experience, if you just talk about it, it's like every other, yeah, we'll talk about it, we'll come to it. But I think, you know, I'm not for putting this in people's objectives. It's the right thing to do, but I do think it should be a KPI for the business.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I can't believe it, but we're running rapidly out of time here now. So it's gone so quickly last hour. But maybe a few closing thoughts from each of you. Just what would you like our audience, who've been really engaging? I don't think I've seen so many questions come in, so you've obviously done something right. What would you like them to take away from the discussion today? So can I start with you, Karen?
Yeah, a few comments, because I think Catherine also said it. And one of my friends, Louis Sabrocki, said that in an interview recently. If you can see it, you can be it. And I think she's a very good example, because she used to be a seafarer and she's now a CEO of one of the biggest public companies in the tanker industry. So it's all about visibility. It's about yeah, and I'm thinking Dutch, so that's not good. It's about it's about being visible. Your leadership needs to be really believe in it, and if they don't, you really need to have those discussions. Make use of the toolkits which are will be available shortly. Learn from other industries, Maria. That's I think a really good point, and find your allies in all respects, not only within your company but from a broader perspective. And I think those are key, including, unfortunately, KPIs.
Thank you, Karen. Catherine?
So I think it's the thing that I think came out earlier on was is when you're thinking about recruitment, really be as open-minded as you can. Think outside of the box for the people that you need, where you can get them from. And some of the roles that we have, you know, clearly are technical roles. It's very clear that the expertise that's needed, but equally across the whole shipping organization, there's a wide variety of roles. So really think, what are the different people that can come in? How can you train them? And then when you do get the people in, support them. You know, yeah. It's not a Friday afternoon job about people. I love that comment. It's think about the environment you're creating for the people that you work so hard to bring them in, and then support them and give them those opportunities. And I think, and be bold with the decisions that you make. That would be the one thing I would say as a takeaway.
Thank you, Catherine. Maria.
Yeah, my final comment, I mean, Karen and Catherine have basically summarised it very well. I guess my message is there is no silver bullet. It's a whole series of different activities a series of activities that will make the industry more diverse and more inclusive. But I think I go back to the most important point is you need diversity, but not at the expense of inclusion. And I think you really need to keep your core workforce with you by using the message, which I do, is whatever the employee resource groups come up with, it doesn't tend to be just good for one group. It tends to make the whole workplace a better place to be. And I think for me, that's what diversity and inclusion is all around, about making it a better workplace for all.
Thank you, Maria, and just thank you to all my panelists, and thank you to the audience as well for listening and being so interactive as well. As mentioned earlier, our diversity and inclusion toolkit will be out very soon, and will be useful to help explain what diversity really is, as well as providing ways to assess the current needs of diverse communities, to identify gaps in services, policies and practice. It also provides useful suggestions on how to fill those gaps. So please do visit our website for more information on that. Thank you once again for our amazing panelists. You've been absolutely superb today. Thank you. And thank you to the audience for your active engagement as well. So we really do appreciate the time you've all taken to join us today, and wish you a good rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy.
My pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.